I want to welcome all of us again in this webinar of income security during this uncertainty. So welcome to this webinar from Asia is good afternoon. For our friends in Europe, good morning. So I will give just a short introduction for this webinar. So according to the ILO, in 2020, there are 8.8% of global working hours, or equivalent to 255 billion full-time jobs, were lost due to the crisis caused by the pandemic. These working hour losses were approximately 4 times greater than during the global financial crisis in 2009. The International Trade Union Confederation, ITUC, estimates that along with the loss of life from the pandemic, almost 500 million jobs have been lost and 2 billion people are struggling in informal work, including in internet platform business. Labor income loss amounted to 3.7 trillion US dollar, or 4.4% of GDP in 2019. So the world today has spent more than 11 trillion US dollar to cope with this fallout from the coronavirus pandemic. Of this, 9.8 trillion, or 83%, was spent by 36 rich countries against just 0.4% in 59 low-income countries. On additional, cash poured specifically into social protection program, 28 rich countries has spent at the rate of 695 US dollar per person. In contrast, the low-income and emerging country has spent only between 28 to 4 US dollar. So over 2 billion people have had no support from their government in their time of need. So in this difficult time, the civil society organization like trade union, civil society movement have shown that they too need to take up responsibility. Despite limitation, they step in by ensuring income guarantees and advocate the government to adopt appropriate or improve the policies in place and get every right holder included in the social protection program. Given the critical need for income guarantee and the absence or lack of the program by the government, this webinar will present some cases where trade union and civil society group tried to ensuring income, particularly due to the crisis caused by the pandemic. With this webinar, we want to learn from cases presented by the members of the 3 regional organizations. So this webinar organized by the 3 regional organizations in Asia. There is Inspire Asia, International Network on Social Protection Right, NTSP, the Network on Transformative Social Protection, and AROSP, the Asia Roundtable on Social Protection. We like to thank all speakers coming from Asia and Europe. We have 7 speakers today from Nepal, Malaysia, Indonesia, Philippines, Vietnam, Belgium, and Germany. And from those cases, we want to highlight the multiple roles of civil society organizations have played and are often still playing during the current pandemic. We also want to exchange on how these good practices can be institutionalized or replicated with institutional support from government. At the end of this webinar, we will adopt a recommendation which will serve as input for plenary session on the issue of sustainable income security at the 13th Asia-Europe People Forum of the Social Justice Cluster. So thanks in advance for your active participation in this webinar. For the first session, this webinar we will have more or less like 2 hours, 10 minutes. So to start the webinar, I will call Mr. Kunha He is now the senior social protection specialist of the ILO based in Bangkok. Mr. Kunha worked first at the Ministry of Labor and Social Security of Portugal before joining the ILO in 2005. And in the ILO, he worked in the Social Protection Department in Geneva before moving to Africa, and finally in 2015 as a Social Protection Senior Specialist of Decent Work Technical Support Team for East and Southeast Asia. So Mr. Duno later on will make a presentation more on the Asia and the Pacific. So I give the floor now to Mr. Nuno for about 15 minutes. Please.
Thank you very much. And in the name of the ILO, allow me to thank you, the organizers, for the invitation. It's always a pleasure to be discussing such an interesting and important and central topic as it is this one. Before I move forward, I just wanted to be sure if someone can confirm that you can see my screen.
Yes, perfect.
Yes, good. And let me start my clock also to be sure I control the time, because there's so much to say about this, but fortunately somehow we already start listening all these figures, and I would not need to underline what kind of crisis we are going, because it was already done very well in the introduction. I think at this stage where we are today, I think we all know this. We are all aware of the impact of this crisis, a unique crisis, and we are all aware of how social protection became central, and we can somehow even say that without, if the situation is complex, we can just imagine what would have been the situation without social protection. But of course, the answer is not the same in every country. But let's go one step back, and some of the information we saw from the ILO analysis in terms of the labor market. We saw that in terms of job loss, it was wage workers who were more affected than self-employed, because self-employed, they probably lost income. They didn't lost exactly the jobs, but they lost opportunities to generate income. They saw for sure their income going down. But there was, in addition to the self-employed losing jobs, there was also a lot of wage workers that lost their jobs, and they had as last resource to try to find solutions within the informal economy. Then one of the things we saw in different countries was actually an increase in informality. And an increase in informality to start the jobs, but also an increase in informality in economic units, because those who were especially micro enterprises or small enterprises who were able before to comply with the requirements to be a registered enterprise, to pay respective taxes, or to enroll their workers in Social Security, with this situation, they were many times not able to do it anymore, and they basically shift even more to the informal economy. And of course, we also saw that, as always, workers in the informal economy face challenges to have their voices heard, even if I have to say that I think one of the differences between this crisis and one of the features of this crisis was a better understanding, or let's say, put this way, more visibility to the issue of informal workers. That working myself many years in this topic, I'm not sure there is an understanding actually of those in the top level of what means informal work and what is the impact of this reality. And I give you an example. In Thailand, there was a concern on supporting informal workers, and they announced a process of registration that actually worked very well, the process of registration, but they announced that they will be providing support for 3 million workers. And they got, in 3 days, 23 million people registering from the informal sector to get support. Then this shows you a little bit the lack of, I think, understanding of the size, even if there are labor force surveys who show it clearly, but at the very high level, there is probably not really an understanding of the impact of this reality. And I think if there is anything positive is that this brought these workers to the picture of very high level, probably because there were concerns and they understand that it's extremely difficult to reach them. And they understand that all this invisibility has a price and this creates challenges. And I hope this will change a little bit the approach in the future. Then, of course, health risks for business owners, workers, customers, I mean, all these, and we are seeing now what's happening in India again. I mean, yesterday I had a talk with the Secretary of State in Cambodia where they are going into lockdown in some neighborhoods, and the situation is really, really catastrophic. I mean, it's really, really very difficult because the people who depend on markets, on selling in the market or buying in the market, they are suffering, they're basically in lockdown. It's extremely difficult to handle it. And then, of course, if people don't have savings, if they don't have access to income, to other measures of income security, they need to sell their productive assets, which will mean that even when the crisis will pass, these people will not have the chance. And I saw an amazing emotional video from Sri Lanka of someone who was a carpenter, and basically they had to sell their tools and basically they had nothing to restart after. And this is also a big problem. Then going on, we did several analyses. We did actually a regional publication with other UN agencies on who are those that are more affected. And of course, I already mentioned people in informal employment, children and young people, for obvious reasons, the losing school years, we don't know yet what's going to happen. And of course, online learning is something that only some can have access. It's not something for everyone. Then again, those who are in most disadvantaged situation, this gap just increased. Of course, the elderly, women, and migrant workers. We really saw the situation of migrant workers is of extremely concern because they are or sometimes associated with by the public as those who bring the virus, as happened at a certain point here in Thailand with the workers from Myanmar, but also they were the first that many times had to leave because with the crisis they lost their jobs and they were kind of in no one land when they will, even in the countries where they will go back, they have no network any longer, they don't have a job. Actually, they are the ones supporting the family at home. Then it's very hard when they go back. It's themselves who will support them. Then we saw a situation that is extremely dramatic. I mean, the response was, I mean, we saw, and I think it was mentioned initially, the size of the social protection response was massive, was probably, we never saw a response of this nature, even in past crises, we haven't, but it also showed the gaps. I mean, it's not possible, it's clearly that if a country doesn't have a social protection system, it's very difficult suddenly to be able to deliver social protection. You need a social protection system. Of course, there were innovations in delivery mechanisms, but I mean, for me, I work directly with many countries and I was involved in the discussions, what are the options. I'm still now actually missing an emergency meeting in Cambodia about how to deliver. And the thing is that it's very difficult when there is no social protection identification mechanisms in place, systems for payments. It's really hard, and we saw a big difference between countries in one side with financial capacity, but even the countries with that could have the chance from a fiscal perspective to put things in place. If you don't have social protection systems, it's very difficult. And we saw, I mean, when we say the measure was, the response was big, but it was big in some countries, the countries that could do it. And I hope this is also a lesson for countries. They need to have social protection systems in place to deal, because this crisis, today we have COVID, then it's natural disasters, but then you have an economic crisis. I mean, we see that unfortunately that's the pattern that we are facing, and social protection, they need to think on the importance of social protection to manage all these potential crises. And like I said, diversity in the response. We saw support variations, we saw cash, we saw in-kind support, depends a lot on the needs. Like yesterday, we were talking in Cambodia and they were saying, yeah, but if we give cash to people, I mean, the markets are closed, we need to deliver rice. And you need to look at the needs, I mean, and what is feasible and what will work better. I mean, we saw some places where the target were workers, others were households, other particular individuals, sectorial support sometimes. We saw top up of benefits, we saw extension of coverage, and we saw both contributory and non-contributory. On these slides, I'll go quickly. I'm not going to be going through statistics. I mean, I think you can do it. I mean, it's nice to be shared, but I think this is just maybe the kind of solutions we had. I mean, maybe just underline the two first: special allowance. We saw a lot of grants. We saw also a lot in terms of income job protection through using unemployment services, transforming them, for instance, in wage subsidies for those who were enrolled in Social Security. I mean, we also saw new benefits. We saw for workers, but also benefits for the most poor, subsidies to wages. We saw increasing in some places, just topping up benefit levels, and most of the times we saw a mix of this. I think countries were trying to use the different elements that they could to handle the situation. And again, here we saw big share of new programs. I mean, what I would say that in one side is the new program shows the lack of tools. It's kind of recognizing that we didn't have social protection in place for the people who actually probably need it. Sorry. Okay. And then the government measures. What we felt is that, as always, we have this situation where you have in one side people who are covered by formal, like contributing to formal social security. That was easier because automatically, when you think about social security, you have unemployment benefits, or you have even partial wages subsidies that you can easily put in place. People are in your list, they can benefit immediately. You have then many countries, you have the targeted programs for the poor, but then you have all these people in the middle, that is probably the majority of the population, who were left out. Or sometimes some countries put in some special schemes, like in Thailand, where they provided benefits, or in India, if I'm not wrong. And countries tried, but still this was, I think, the big gap was in this missing middle, that were not poor enough to be in the register, the existing registry of poor people. They were not considered on like, let's say, the safety net approach. They were also not covered by social security, formal social security. Then they were in this situation. Then what are the questions? I mean, we saw lots of actions, but what is happening now? I mean, this was the beginning, lots of emergency measures. I mean, what will happen when these emergency measures close? I mean, some countries are coming back and having new measures, some probably not. I mean, yep. Then even when the crisis, okay, the health crisis will finish, that unfortunately we are not probably that close as we thought we were, but I mean, the recovery phase, will they just downgrade social protection interventions? In my view, you need social protection to boost the economy, to recover, to speed up recovery, to ensure that the demand level comes up and that the economy can work. And I hope we don't go back to the past and we can keep these measures longer. But we also know, we are already listening this kind of speech that countries, of course, they have less fiscal revenues. They are already, there is a speech already preparing, and we see it's kind of our traditional cycle of crisis. At a certain point, we start listening the IMF and the Ministry of Finance talking about that there's no resources, that we need to start to be more conservative, and we need to be careful about this because we are so far from being able to afford this kind of speech. Then for me, if I would have a crystal ball, I would say that social protection it will become even more important even when we pass this moment of crisis. If we really want to get back of this crisis, it will become more important. And I think we need to keep this message, and we cannot relax at all, because we know that there will be a discussion on between we need now to recover the fiscal balances, or a discussion saying, or other position saying we need social protection. Of course, I don't need him to say in which side of the discussion I am. But the discussion is not only about, okay, we need to keep emergency measures, we need to think seriously, and this region particularly that spends below the global average when it comes to social protection, that is below the global average, and even compare, for instance, I was looking at data recently, Latin America, I was writing myself a report, and I was looking at Latin America, countries with similar levels of income, but I mean, this expenditure on social protection in this region is much lower. And if we exclude the countries like Japan, Korea, then, I mean, the average, most of the countries, they have a very low spending, and it's time to think seriously if this is the model we want, this is the model with a future, or if we just want every time we have a crisis to have to put all these emergency measures in place. Some ideas for the way forward. I have now 30 seconds. I mean, yeah, we need, I mean, this is the discussion I just mentioned before. We need money. We need to be careful with the discussion on the need to balance public finances, because it's also true that needs are there, and we are seeing that they are massive, and international solidarity needs to play also an important role. I mean, I think we know that low-income countries will have a challenge to deal with all the needs, and it's really important regional and global international solidarity. I mean, the importance, of course, of social protection floors and universal approaches to ensure that we don't have these missing gaps, this missing middle. It's really, really important, but also the importance of formalization. We probably will need to look at some groups that are, when the recovery starts, we know that some groups will have more challenges to recover, and we need probably some specific support to those groups. We also need combination with benefits with active labor market policies. We're not going to have the same economic landscape. We will need probably new skills. It's really very important. Social dialogue. I mean, we cannot think about these solutions without listening the employers and listening the workers. I mean, this is very important. And of course, international labor standards can play an important role in this. Now, just to close, I mean, I'm already over 1 minute, but this is my last slide. It's really, really important. I think we need to start thinking seriously on tackling the missing middle. That is workers who are kind of really out of the scope of social protection. We need to think about what means formalization. I mean, not meaning just taxing them or making them paying contributions, but maybe adjusting the systems as they are today to be sure that the systems of social security and social protection in these countries, they really look at the labor market reality, and they need to be adjusted. And one element for me is further integration. This division between non-contributory systems and tax funds and contributory sides, we need to find some way of blending this if we really want to move forward with extending coverage. Okay, that's what I had to share with you. Thank you very much. I mean, let's just leave you with a message about the new normal, but for who and when and how. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Nuno. I think your presentation is very comprehensive, and thank you very much for the recommendation. I think it's very important for our webinar. Now for the next session, I will give the session to Sister Tuha. Please, Sister Tuha.
Yeah, hello. Kathy, you will put the introduction of the section 1, or I will do it? So yeah, after Nuno presentation, so we will start the section 1 with the speaker from 3 countries, Nepal, Philippines, and Belgium. From Nepal, we will have Mr. Bidu Kaki, Vice President of ZEFON, General Federation of Nepalese Trade Unions. ZEFON is one of the largest trade union confederations in Nepal, with 20 affiliates and almost 400,000 workers from agriculture, industry, and service in the formal and informal economy, including migrant workers. And from Philippines, we have Ms. Josephine Olive Parilla, member of Executive Committee of HomeNet Philippines, president of Patamaba Worker in the informal sector enterprise called WISE. Secretary of the HomeNet Producer Cooperative. And HomeNet Philippines is a broad network of organizations of home-based and other workers in the informal economy. Patamaba National Network of Informal Workers, also HomeNet Philippines affiliates with almost 20,000 individual members. And Patamaba WISE is the economic arm of Patamaba Rizal chapter with 338 members, established in 2004. Oliver will talk more about the WISE later in her presentation. So from Belgium, we have Mr. Martin William, Secretary of United Freelancer Christian Trade Union. The Christian Trade Union established its United Freelancer membership and service in June 2019, very currently. Through the membership, freelancer and self-employed without employer can get the same support and service as employees, adapted to their specific need and jointly demand better and safer working conditions, decent wage, and adequate social protection. So now I would like to invite the first speaker, Mr. Vidu Kaki from Nepal. He will share a trade union perspective on the Prime Minister Employment Program in Nepal. You have 10 minutes to share about local contact initiative, its impact, and maybe some challenge and some recommendation. So you will share the screen or the organizer we have you. Vidu?
Yes. Thank you very much, Sister Van. I am Bidur Karki from Nepal. Thank you very much giving me this opportunity. And I have no slide presentation, but I have some talking points, and I'll talk based on that. All of you know about Nepal. Nepal is a small country, landlocked country in between India and China, and this is the developing country. Until now, it's the total population 29.58 millions populations, and there are more than 63.7% of total population below the age of 30, so that younger populations is higher than others. And total employed peoples around 68% in Nepal, and about 2.3% are totally unemployed, and 30% are disguised unemployed, and 5.7% are totally dependent in agriculture. This is the small scenario of the employment. And similarly, we have unemployed increment rate is higher than now after COVID, because in 2019 the World Bank reported that 2.85% unemployed people at the time, but in 2020, December 2020, it was increased 4.44%. That means just double than that. So that the ratio of the unemployed people are very much higher than previous year. So Nepali economy basically dependent on remittance and foreign employment. Nepal is a labor-sending country, and basically workers flowing outside to work in hazardous, unsafe, exploited, and miserable conditions. And currently more than 5.4 million working peoples outside the country, and overwhelming majority in Gulf and Malaysia and India as well. So we were very much serious in this regards, and G-Fund has been advocating for the wage employed and employed-led growth instead of profit-led growth, lobbying for workers' right and social security. In the process of constitution drafting, made it possible to insert a number of workers' right in the constitution of Nepal. Based on that, our constitution has been mandated that based on fundamental right chapter of Nepalese constitution, right to employed in Article 33 and right to work in Article 34, and similarly based on that right to employment Act 2018 was activated, and then right to employment regulation 2018 also adopted by the cabinet. And similarly we have a Prime Minister Employment Program Operation Directives 2018, that is he started the Prime Minister Employment Program was started from since 2018, and basically our demand was that to guarantee a minimum 100 days of employment for the unemployed to ensure implementation of right to work under this article of constitution. And similarly the Prime Minister Employment Program was launched in this way. There were the Communist Party lead government finally initiated that Prime Minister Employment Program to be implemented in every local government in 753 municipalities and rural municipalities. And in fiscal year 2018-19, it was witnessed that 1.7 million workers register in that program in 728 local government out of 753. The total amount allocated by the federal government was Nepali rupees 3.1 billion. This is a huge money for that. It means the government was very much serious to generate employment. And under this program, the first of all, the government was employment coordinator for all these local government to launch a Prime Minister Employment Program were appointed by federal government. And in fiscal year 2018-19, the total 645 local coordinator was employed, and then the project was designed for employment generation in road, building and work, agriculture and irrigation, and rural drinking water supply, and health and sanitation, education, forest and water based areas, tourism based industries, and other labor intensive sectors as well. And we have another program for wage for work. Project works were also pushed forward to towards that, and which provided daily wages work to 172,000 people workers in the first year. But this number is a little bit decreasing. Second year, the applicant are decreasing the numbers, and we have impact of this program. First, follow the income in rural unemployed. This is focused to the rural sector, so that flow to income to rural unemployed, and small project of local government annual program supported by the Prime Minister Employment Program. And impact in cities was little bit lower than that, and but it was more visible in rural municipalities. And hope of getting job in local level, we are hoping that, but and we have lesson learned from that. Only wage supported in the support is insufficient, because the government allocated the budget for the wage support only, and through this our support of physical and financial capital from the federal and provincial government is needed to provide employment to the peoples. And every local municipality talking about that, the if we wanted to provide some job, there should be some financial support, not only wages, but this program supported only wages. So this is our lesson learned, and we need to extend our budget for that. And similarly, self-employed support through skill training and financial support to them for their own micro enterprises may be better in addition to wage support work. Similarly, if we talk an income security position, and income come from just two ways: one wages and second self-employed income. And but due to this COVID, the self-employed income is very less, and the wage earners also not getting the good wages in that time. And so that we need to, job security is essential for that. And if there will be the job security, income security will be confirmed. Otherwise we have some problem. For this purpose, we need to generate a welfare program from the government, one, and second, operation of support for the micro saving credit program as well, because our self-employed workers are depositing some of amount, daily amount, and in the micro credit, micro saving and credit. Through that micro saving credit amount, they will survive during this undesirable circumstances. And another, our proposal to the government, non-residential Nepali association, Nepali workers, those who are earning money from the abroad, they should invest in the income generating activities rather than the charity program. All of our NRNA are investing in the charity program, charity projects as well, so that we are requesting them, and government also requesting them to invest in the income generating program. So this is my very brief information about our Prime Minister Employment Program. And now I conclude my speech, and if you have any question, we'll discuss on later. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bidu. You are on time. Exactly
Thank you.
10 minutes. Please, the participant, if you have a question, please put on the chat box or question and answer box. So now I would like to invite the second speaker from Philippines, Miss Josephine Oliver Parilla. She will share on alternative livelihood in the Philippines during the COVID pandemic. You also have a 10 minutes, Olive. So
Yeah,
please.
can I have my? I will do my screen share, please.
Yeah, you can do it now, right?
Where is my presentation? Okay, wait. Sorry. I think I cannot do it. Can you? I already sent it to you. Share screen, and then what shall I do?
I can also share it for you if you want.
Yeah, please. I cannot do it.
Okay, no problem. I will open it.
Okay. Good afternoon. Thank you, AMRC, for inviting me, and of course for my organization to ask me to present this afternoon our story, the local practice, the Patamabawais story. So not yet. Okay. So as okay, wait. Okay. Next slide, please. I will not deal much my next slide. Next slide, please. Well, next slide, please. This is the problem. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So Okay, I will not deal on WISE because it has been said already by Tuha. Next slide, please. So that's the background, WISE being the economic arm of Patamaba Rizal. Next slide, and we are affiliated. Next slide. Next slide, please. Can I? We are affiliated from Homeless Philippines and Patamaba National. So we belong to the informal sector, of which the government defined as the units engaged in the production of goods and services that generate employment and income to earn a living. So this is basically the subsistence area. Next slide. Next slide. Next slide, please. Okay. This is our sectoral issues and visibility, participation, representation, access to productive resources, then access to social security, justice, and protection of workplaces and even from violence. Next slide. Next slide, please. Next slide. Okay. Again, most of us are women, so we also faces the problem of women in the workforce. And in fact, we do value the reproductive and care work, and we talk about the unpaid care work for women, not just being do the budgeting, leader in the organization, as wife, as a mother. So we have a big role in the productive, reproductive, and community role in our society. So women contribute to the national and local economy, but we, of course, depends on the situation and culture of women in our country. Next slide, please. So next slide. Next slide. Okay. Again, as what we are aiming for, the informal sector and its workers need a holistic and integrated approach on representative housing, affordable and social crop insurance, and among others. So even even health, even the issue of gender-based violence. Next slide. Next slide, please. Next slide. Oh, God, my goodness. I'm consuming my time. Please, next slide. Next slide.
Yeah, of course. I'm trying to do that, but it has all the arrows. So, okay.
Okay. So, yes, that's what the informal sector and its workers need. And in fact, we also had this pandemic impact to members. We all worries and fear of being contaminated by COVID. We fear of loss of jobs, income, and business closure. With the lack of mobility because of restriction, especially to senior citizens. We have stress affected mental health, and we worry about the daily food consumption. Next slide. And next slide, please. Aside from the the next slide will also tell us also the pandemic has impact on gender-based violence, discrimination against for the COVID survivor. Because once you're a COVID survivor, or even you're a COVID victim, you're been into bullying. Then education of abnormalities shift to online education, increasing of children in conflict with the law, no? Because no other vices by the children is, of course, to engage in some activities that conflict with the law. And then we also recognize the assistance from local government or the national government from financial and food and non-food is not enough. Next slide. So the economic operation impact due to crisis, the enterprise and income, the less production, inventories, and among others. And we also have limited operation due to lockdowns, and the volume of production down at least from 60 to 70%. We cannot collect because from our receivables, since government and families have to prioritize food consumption. And there is a limited service since net surplus from the business operation is very low. But there is an opportunity because we shift to PPE's production and acquired new technologies. Next slide, please. So this is what the positive side of the pandemic. We were able to produce personal protective equipment and wearables production. And then we're able to access relief operation from MRC to urban gardening and any other candles and doormat production. And we supplied PPEs to networks and firms as part of their corporate social responsibility. And of course, the digital marketing online. And we learn more about our national situation and issue through online attendance and webinars. And through this, also COVID give us an opportunity to organize more. Next slide. Next slide. So this is one example that we shipped, and then we have this purple market. Next slide, please. We're able to showcase our product online. Next slide. And of course, we have a backyard gardening, which we promote urban gardening and consumption of food, vegetables. And we would like also to share with you our solidarity-based action, where we solicit and we distribute to the solicitation we did in terms of face masks, food packages, disinfectant, home care products, and we serve as frontliner volunteers in our community. Next slide. So this is next slide, please. Next slide. So what is our approach in our ways forward in combating the poverty, and of course in also in having our income security? So we said our approach is leaderpreneurship, being a leader and entrepreneur, and entrepreneurship. That's we have this program, leaderpreneurship, and this was conceptualized way back in 1998 when we had a project with ALNI Philippines, together with Trade Union Congress of the Philippines and Kakasahab, Balikatan sa Kaunradan, Patamaba, and KMKI. So we were able to coin this word, leaderpreneur. Next slide. Next slide, please. So what, as what Sewa said, Sewa believes that that leadership is a combined or an approach where everybody can work. And social solidarity economy, a concept designating enterprises organization that has a mutual benefit societies association, which of course for people, planet, prosperity, what we call the triple bottom line. Next slide, please. So next slide. So the convergence of social solidarity and entrepreneurs is from the national government, stakeholders, civil society, private sector, trade union, and even the communities. Next slide. And our agenda towards decent work, sustainable development goals attainment and resilience, we have the social protection and climate change adaptation. We have the human resource services, the asset reform, which we want land ownership, housing, and common area production, participation and representation and employment and economic empowerment, where our concept is social solidarity economy. Next slide, please. And this is, as what we said, the governance framework of organizing and monitoring advocacy and policies, awareness raising, direct assistance, and of course through social dialogue and participatory in decision making with informal sector and any other stakeholders. Next slide, please. Next slide. So Patamaba-wise approaches are also aligned with various goals in the SDG and SSE dimension. So we have the different goals from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 8, 10, 11, 12, 13, 16, and 17. So I will just round down fast. Next slide, please. Next slide. Next slide. My problem. Okay, on social responsible governance. So this is what the indicators we said. We are into SDG and SSE dimension of people-centered development, environmental conservation, anyway, I'll be having this presentation of mine so you can have also my presentation. Next slide. Next slide, please. And then socioeconomic sustainability and government program. No, we were asked. So currently, we had the Philippine government has Bayanihan 1 and 2, the Social Amelioration Program, the SB Core Funds for Economic Recovery, the government Petri Fund, DA, Department of Agriculture, Department of Labor and Employment Integrated Livelihood Program, TESDA Free Skills Training, DTI Shared Service Facilities, DOF Financial Inclusion, Ease of Doing Business, and currently we are into the roadmap for the development of the Plan on Enterprise Formalization. This is in response to ILO recommendation 204. Next slide, please. Last slide. So last two slides. And right now we have the 8-point National Employment Recovery Action Plan, with subsidy, job summit, passage of priority legislative agenda. This includes the enterprise entrepreneurship, support.
Subsidy for private sector.
Next slide, please. Last slide, please.
Conduct a job.
Next slide. Next slide.
Support
Next slide, please.
process.
And then we have that extend and then ways forward, stay healthy, strengthen the organization, continue to produce. Next slide, please. Continue to advocate workers' rights. And last slide, access funds, continue to promote ECSE, support enterprise formalization transition, continue to campaign social protection, and promote patronizing local products. Thank you and good afternoon.
Thank you, Oliver. So very informative and long presentation. Now I invite the speaker from Belgium, Martin William. William will share the challenge to guarantee social security to platform workers. You also have 10 minutes. So your turn now. You use the screen now, right?
Okay, thank you. So I'm Martin Willems from Belgium. So Belgium is a little country in Europe between Germany, France, and Britain, and it's supposed to be a developed country. But we saw, and certainly through the pandemic, that it's not the case for everyone in the country. So our new division, United Freelancers, is concerned with organizing all non-standard types of work. Typically, mainly self-employed workers and also platform workers. So you may think, why do you consider self-employed workers as a non-standard form of work? It's because in Belgium, and it's typical of most Western countries, self-employed are considered more to be employers than workers. Whereas 70% of self-employed are not employers. So we began to organize them and say, okay, they also need to defend their working conditions. Also because self-employment is used by employers to bypass the employees' rights and to bypass the social security. I said that one of our main projects is to organize also platform workers. So the workers working for platforms like Uber, Deliveroo, and so on. So those are never up to now employees. Some are self-employed, but most of them are in not exactly a third status, but something the previous government created. It's a loophole. In fact, it's what they call collaborative work. It's a type of work where you are neither employee, neither self-employed, and you don't have access to a social security at all. So with the pretense of making things simple, with the pretense of simplicity. In fact, the previous government officialized informal work, because for those workers, it's exactly the same result as informal work. So during the pandemic, the platform workers didn't receive any support at all, because okay, they are not associated to any social security. They don't have any social security rights. But and then they were forced then to continue working in more difficult condition. Naturally, it was there was the fear of being also contaminated and so on, but also with the double penalty that a lot of the informal work in Belgium, for instance, in restaurants, in cafes, those people losing their job, they tried also to have an income, to maintain their income, working for the platforms. So in fact, we had a huge influx of new workers going to the platforms. And you know, with this system, the amount of work is in fact shared by the workers. So if you have more workers, you have less work for each worker, so less income for every worker. So the platform workers suffered a lot during the pandemic due to difficult work, but also a serious decrease in their income. We see at United Freelancers that the number of self-employed is increasing in all sectors, and self-employed workers, they have to pay themselves for their social security, and their social security rights are lower than the rights for employees. So our main struggle is to try to improve the social security rights for the self-employed. And I think the pandemic, if we could also consider it as an opportunity, it was at least an opportunity to show to everybody that social security is paramount, it's very important, and that every worker needs it. There was a tradition in Belgium and in a lot of countries that self-employed people that doesn't need a social security, they care for themselves. But during this pandemic, it could not be the case, and it made it very clear that everybody needs a social security and the same rights to social security. Voilà, in a nutshell, I think this is our main concerns.
Thank you. So you spend less than 10 minutes, so we have more time for question and answer. Now I see some question in the box. One question directly to Vidu from Suli3 about the social security program for migrant workers in Nepal. So, Vidu, you want to answer it now, or?
Yes, yes. Thank you very much for question, Sister Soli. Yes, this is we have two types of social security program. One contributed social security program, and another is social protection. Social protection totally provided by the government, like old age people and single woman and disabled and other such kinds of people. And this contributed social program, security program, those workers who are contributing themselves in the social security fund. But our dream was this program was started since 2 years before. But our desire was that this was a very effective. But until now, only 175,000 people's workers are registered, and sum of millions rupees deposited in the social security program. This, but however, we are demanding to insert migrant workers too. But until now, we have no such kinds of legal provision to contributing from migrant workers from their destinations. So that this is our complication. But we are demanding that. And similarly, we have another problem regarding the informal workers. Until now, we have no such kinds of system to contribute from the informal workers. And now just we drafted rules for informal workers, how they contribution and how what they achieve, such types of. But that is passed by the Social Security subcommittee and forwarded to the Social Security Board, and this is under discussion. So that we are not covering migrant workers until now. Yes, this is my response. Thank you.
Thank you, Bido. We also have other question from Rocky Green. I don't know question to whom, maybe to everyone who would like to answer. We talk about we are living in a certainty of job and income, and migrant become some way to earn a living, and on the top of that is the fare. So it's kind of I don't know, kind of feeling. You want to express or what? Who want to respond to this?
Can I share something?
Yeah, please.
Yes, after this pandemic, more than 700,000 migrant workers are returning in the country, and out of that, half of them again they return back to the destination. And those who are in the country and they are searching a job, and we suggested to the government to utilize their skills and utilize them in the production sector. So that government allocated some budget for them, and in last year budget, and based on that, some are starting their farming and cattle farming and agriculture, and some are engaged into the other informal types of business, so that they are engaging in that that way. This is the scenario. But how anyway, but we are not cover all those returnees in production sector or income generating activities. Even those are we had a data collection from the data collection of pilot level, and those most of them, about 64%, they wanted to sit in the country. They do not wanted to go back in the country, but in fact they more than 50% again return back. This is our scenario. So our policy is that, and requesting to the government, anyway we should utilize their skills and utilize their capacity to work. So this is our program, and maybe this year government will address in this regards too. Thank you.
Thank you, Bidu. Yeah. Okay, you, William, you want to say something?
Yes, I would like to say something. So the question was wide, naturally, about uncertainties in work. I think we all know even in countries where as Belgium, where we felt now protected in a privileged situation, but we now know that okay, something like a pandemic can happen anytime. Sure, it won't be the last one. We have also the challenge of the climate change. That will change a lot in social organization and work. So yes, we are in an uncertain world. That's why I think social security is important and should be a universal right for anybody, for any worker, whatever the status. We have to change the current existing systems linking social security with standard work, because a lot of workers are not in this traditional situation. But also uncertainty is a construction. You have the challenge of the world, but we saw, as I explained in Belgium, that the government created a new type of non-standard work for a digital economy and with more uncertainties. So it's also important for us as unions to denounce that and to insist on building what social security could be in this uncertain world. Thank you.
Thank you. We have one question from Hạnh Lê from Vietnam, right? But I haven't catch up, so but it disappeared already. But there's one comment for saying that Nuno can talk a little bit about the missing middle to explain about her idea. So maybe Nuno, you can talk a little bit about that.
Actually, after that, I have to leave for another meeting, then it's good to talk now.
Okay.
No, I was listening, and I think it's unfortunately this missing middle is too big in many countries. I think, and it's very interesting to be listening the colleague from Belgium, because in Europe we see it's kind of a process is happening, that we have a precarization of labor. We have a move from more standard forms of work to non-standard forms of work. Here, this is the reality for a long time. Unfortunately, this is the reality. And what I think is that I completely agree. We had a system of social security that was designed, social insurance, that was designed to handle a reality of full-time jobs, most in industrialized economies. And I don't think we can expect this model to be answering to the questions. And I mean, even if a self-employed will contribute, would it be fair that this person has to contribute both as the same thing as someone who has an employer contributing? Knowing that, at least in this region, the self-employed, if we look to any household survey, these are also people with lower incomes, with unstable incomes. Then when I talk about integration of funding, is indeed because I mean, we have a lot of this discussion on non-contributory pensions, on the non-contributory extension, let's say, of the floor. But for me, more than that, it's about having a system that brings the two elements together, because there is indeed a certain level of protection that needs to be universal for everyone. But I think the system should be designed in a way that these funds are combined to offer decent protection. I give you, because what we see, I mean, in most of these non-contributory pensions that are managed by, let's say, the Ministry of Social Affairs, they are usually they are safety nets. They are not really social protection. They don't, then I think we need to find new ways where we adjust the way contributions are made. For instance, do we think that the monthly contribution is the best solution for everyone? I mean, if we look at a motor taxi driver here in Bangkok, probably a daily contribution, a small quantity every day would work better. And we need to think, or a farmer maybe needs to contribute more 3 times a year. And some of them, they will probably not be able to contribute the fully premium. And I'm calling it premium, it's not the fully contribution because premium is in the private insurance. But probably then the government could subsidize, and I don't like to look at formalization like, okay, we have to charge people, we have to find a way of making these people pay taxes, or they pay taxes anyway. They pay taxes when they buy things, they pay taxes, but I would like people to look a little bit, for instance, in some countries, the Latin America approach, where they have these simplified mechanisms where people who are in micro enterprises or self-employed, they only have to pay they don't have to pay one tax here and contributions there, and they just pay what is called mono tax, where because it's also, even administratively, it's a burden for self-employed, for small enterprises. And the government understands that the main goal is to protect people. Of course, you need to think on how you fund it, but I think we need to go a little bit out of the box. And there are examples. Look, for instance, the system in China of rural pensions, people have to contribute 15 years, but they only have to contribute once a year. And then the government, in addition to what people contribute in their own account, they provide, from the moment the person reached that level, that number of years of contribution, they provide a basic pension that is funded from general revenue. It's not enough. But the idea, and in Japan, self-employed, everyone needs to register, for instance, for pensions. Everyone is obliged. It's not depending on your employment relation. But from the moment you are self-employed, for instance, you have different levels of contribution. And if you lose your job, or if you can even be exempted from contribution. I think we need to design models that really look at the current labor markets. And I think blending, the part of the solution is integration of policies, is because otherwise it's, I mean, again, when it comes to micro enterprises, many of the informal employment takes place in the informal sector. And by informal sector, I'm talking about enterprises, economic units that are not formalized. Then if we want to promote extension of coverage, we need to think in integrated ways of supporting also micro enterprises. I think for me, it's the key word, is integration. It's kind of my fight, my fight is you need to bring the different players together. Okay, I think I probably exceeded a little bit my time in my answer, but thank you for giving me the opportunity.
Yeah, thank you, Nuno. We have some more question. One to Martin from Rocky. Any social protection given to platform worker? So
in fact, no, there is no social protection at all for the platform workers, because I already said it, but probably not clear enough. You have the standard employees, you have the self-employed, and then the government created a loophole, something like designed, in fact, for so-called side activities. It's called a collaborative economy. But the platform, the industrial platform, the great platform like Uber, they misuse this, and they classify all their workers in this collaborative economy. It's simple, that's right, but there is no social contribution and no social right. So they don't have any social right at all. In case of an accident, they don't receive anything. So it's it's a problem, because a lot of those workers, they don't even know that they are not protected. So a lot of our task is to begin by informing them of the risk. Now I make the link with one of the questions I saw. It's how to organize a momentum to build a better social security. I think something very important is to unite all workers, because in Belgium, but it's the same situation, I guess, in a lot of countries. You have various systems. You have a social security system for the civil servants. It's different than the social security system for the regular employees. You have another system for the self-employed, and you have no system at all for the platform workers. So, for instance, if the government or anybody is making a change in the system for the civil servants, all the other workers, they don't care, because they say, okay, I'm not a civil servant, so I don't care. And so you divide the forces. We are trying to go to a unified social security system, the same system for everybody, so that it will be defended by all workers at the same time, with the same rights for everybody, and universal rights, whatever your working situation is. Thank you.
Thank you, Martin. So in fact, the question from Sandeep, talking about no social protection for informal worker anywhere. So it seems that they are left for charity. And so her question is how to organize a momentum in this regard. Any strategy from you? So in fact that Martin already answered a part of that question. If you have other panelists, if you have more sharing, you can share on this question. Otherwise,
can I?
Last question for Josephine.
Okay. Okay. I will go back first to the question of social protection. Here in the Philippines, well, the government trying to. We have, in fact, we define social protection, which is not just social security, but as well as labor market intervention, safety net, social insurance, and among others. So, but we recognize then, as what Marie said, that a while ago, that our really social protection is not just an antiquated one. No, it is just somehow for us it's a kind of intervention that because there's a problem, you'll be just a pace for a kind of intervention. So there is. And there is right now, and there was, but again, it's a matter of how it is really effective. The implementation was and the implementation is. Okay, to answer the question, reproductive problem, you know what, care work, the unpaid care work in the Philippines is what we are asking, what is one of the agenda for women, because you know women has a multi-burden role, being a mother, as what I've said, the reproductive role she made is not being counted and not being somehow to many, it's not just being, not even not being complemented. So it's really an issue of the reproductive role of women in the Philippines. That's why we are there's an advocacy for the unpaid care work that be given a priority for a legislation, so that reproductive women or not just women doing reproductive role will also be recognized and will be also be protected. So that's the answer. I hope that I've shared it somehow.
Thank you, Zerwin. It seems that it's still one more question. We run out of time. Okay. To conclude, I would like to say that we thank a lot the three speakers from three countries. In this section, we hear a lot about the words of income loss, job loss, worry, fear, stress, discrimination, support's not enough, but we also hear about opportunity, about the big issue of new technology, about solidarity, and also we also hear about uniting of all the worker, informal worker, we also hear about more strongly about universe, social protection. So we will hear more from the second section later, moderated by Maris. So I would like to end up this section here. Thank you, everyone.
Sister Tuha, for facilitating the first session. Now I will give the session to Sister Maris from NTSP, please.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. For this second session, we will learn about the cases or initiatives in 4 other countries from Indonesia, Germany, Malaysia, and Vietnam. Each speaker will have 10 minutes to share their respective stories. And let's begin from the Indonesian case. Let us hear from Ms. Ellie Rosita Silaban, President of KSBSI, or Konfederasi Serikat Buruh Seluruh Indonesia. KSBSI was formed in 1992 during the repressive military regime, and currently it is affiliated with ITUC. Its struggle for freedom and association and the right to collective bargaining has resulted in the ratification of all ILO Core Convention by the Indonesian government in 1998. Ellie will share with us the trade union's perspective on the new unemployment mechanism. She will speak in Bahasa, so I would like to remind again the participants to tune in or look into the translation. At the bottom of your screen, you will see there the globe if you haven't switched yet to Bahasa. So switch your language to Bahasa. And then, yeah, so let's welcome Ms. Ellie Rosita Silaban.
Thank you. Nice to see you everyone on the screen. I try my best to using my English. Ya,
Bahasa aja, Mbak.
Ya, karena aku nggak bikin bahasa Indonesia, Mas. Ya, ya, ya. So, but maybe sometime I will need your assistant if I find something very difficult to translate in English. So, thank you for this occasion. I just want to try the present situation right now in Indonesia. For the first slide, maybe you can share my slide, Mr. Bismo. Or yeah. Yes, the next slide. Yeah, I revised this for number of workforce right now. It's like 133.56 million. This is the latest version, and then number of unemployment 7.05 million. Number of underemployment 8.14 million. Number of workers less than 35 hours per week, 46 million. Number of new workforce a year, 2.24 million. And number of job creation, 2.7 until 3 million per year. Number of workers covered by Social Security body insurance for programs like death benefit, old age benefit, work accident benefit, and pension benefit. It is only between only between 12 until 19 million, but uncovered by BPJS around 100 million. But I try to asking try to get the new version right now for 2020. The number of workers covered by BPJS insurance is 51.75 million. Next slide, please. Yep. Currently, the Indonesian government has launched 2 programs. That's pre-employment card for youth job seeker. Based on Statistic Bureau, the Indonesian workforce has never received certified training. government pay tuition for vocational training to the training institute, registration by internet platform, and this program will get by people aged 18 years or above. And the second program is unemployment insurance, we call JKP for workers lost their job. Government pay tuition for vocational training, like upgrade skill or shift skills, and also they will get cash transfer, and then job search assistant or access to job market information. As you know, since 2003, ILO already asking it to establish unemployment insurance, but our government just accept it by the new law and already put it in the government regulation number 37 2021. And this unemployment insurance only implementing for the workers who pay fees to social security body, and also at least they pay their fees for 6 months in 24 months. And for this issue, there is no cover for the, there is no what's this unemployment insurance for the workers in informal economy. And also the workers who get the unemployment insurance only for the workers who get salary only 5 million and below. Yeah. Next, yeah. KSBC do something like advocacy for this issue. KSBC was starting advocacy on unemployment insurance due to 2008 economic crisis and to avoid multiple crises like in 1998. In 2015, with the new elected government of Pak Joko Widodo, the government of Indonesia and BPJS employment gives positive response on the possibility of unemployment insurance. Tripartite dialogue and on unemployment insurance, including plus ILO. 2019, the Gold Initiative Pre-Employment Card, KSBC invited for discussion and establish this for the first time 2020. And on April this month, we start discussion, a collaboration with executive management who responsible for this pre-card, and we will make like agreement, and the first pilot project will be in East Kalimantan and also Maluku, because this region only little to get the access for this pre-employment card. 2020, the goal initiated unemployment insurance already done, and also already put on the government regulation in 2021. And 2021, still dialogue on the implementation of this unemployment insurance put on government regulation. The impact of this pre-employment card, for the pre-employment card, the people or the the people who register is around 43.8 million. This is based on the data. I just get it. But only 5.5 million people are participating in the vocational training benefit temporarily shift to workers laid off due to COVID-19 pandemic crisis. So even though this much, this amount registered and also participating, but it seems they only want to get the money, because also there is a cash transfer for people who register and also for participating. Operational regulation on unemployment insurance just released by the government, which will give impact to 7 million unemployed peoples and 8 million underemployed peoples. The lesson learned we got, only 2 confederations of trade union affiliated to International Trade Union Confederation Indonesia, KSBI, KSBC, and KSPI. So the government and also there's another stakeholder only see the possibilities for these two confederation to like make social dialogue, like asking our idea. But as you know, KSBC is the only one who always present there, because we understand our responsibility for the workers, and also, of course, we want to influence the policy about this. The government of Indonesia and ILO normally have social dialogue with the most representative union confederation like KSBC, KSPI, and KSPC, and other. So for a long time until now, only 5 confederation always fighting by government and association, employer association, but the confederation always present there is always KSBC and 2 other, but KSPI is never present there. General election and change of government can be a window of opportunity for policy change on social protection. Even though right now we have the new law, but we see the some chapter degraded our workers' right, but we still fight for that. Social dialogue not only in Jakarta capital city, but we are pressured nationwide, because what is that? In KSBC itself, even though we have a memorandum of understanding with employer association, and also some federation also have agreement with their management, but we push now in every region to make to have dialogue social, and also have a document about that, because in the uncertainty times right now, very dangerous time to us, we have to have another strategy to save our life. Advocacy takes many years, and good initiatives could be different with operational regulation and implementation. And we still need monitoring, because you know, in Indonesia, even though everything already put in the regulation, and sometimes I call it like paper regime, because so many regulations, so many law, but the less comply. So that is my for the last statement. I think we concerned about the protection of informal workers. The exclusion of informal workers from this insurance, like unemployment insurance protection, adds to the long list of neglect of informal workers in the discourse of labor protection in Indonesia, which start from a narrow definition that the employment relationship is the relationship between employers and workers on a work agreement. In fact, employers are not always entrepreneurs, but can also be the individuals or non-legal entities who employ workers. Changing the unemployment insurance provision to be more inclusive and covering informal workers can be a good starting point for protecting all workers without exception. This can be done by, for example, providing unemployment insurance to informal workers who have registered as Social Security body participants in the another program for a certain period of time, like they also pay their fees. The government cannot continue to ignore the protection of informal workers. In fact, they are the majority group in the working demographic of Indonesia. They also need certainty and guarantee of protection as well as formal sector workers. Thank you for listening me. I'm still here if you need something to ask or clarification.
Thanks so much, Ellie. Thanks so much for sharing the interesting mechanisms to provide income in this time of crisis, especially the unemployment insurance as a response to worsening unemployment in Indonesia. Our next speaker is supposed to be from Germany. Unfortunately, we learned that he hasn't entered the room yet. So we will now proceed to our speaker from Malaysia. So yeah, our speaker from Malaysia is Ke Wong, a researcher at Monitoring Sustainability of Globalization, which does research and advocacy on trade, labor, and water issues in the country and the region. MSN also provides research and advocacy support to trade unions and labor groups in the region, besides working with parliamentarians, media, activists, and policymakers. Wong will share with us the government's plan or the campaign of workers for income support from the government.
Okay, thank you, Maris, for the very brief introduction. Hi, everyone. I'm representing my director, which is Charles Santiago, who is also the MP, Member of Parliament for Malaysia. Okay, so a very quick introduction. So for what is happening around Malaysia. So 2020 is a difficult year for most of the country due to COVID-19 pandemic, and Malaysia labor force situation in 2020 also profoundly caused by the health crisis and also economic consequences like everybody else, leading to the unemployment rate to reach 4.5% compared to 3.3% last year. Okay, 3.3% in 2019 to be precise. So during the health crisis, the monthly unemployment rate has hovering between 3.9% to 5.3%, and the annual unemployment rate has increased by 1.2% up to 4.5% in 2020, which is the highest rate since 1993. So despite the government has introduced 5 physical stimulus, economic stimulus packages, which worth 320 billion Malaysian ringgit in less than 1 year to mitigate the economic shock. However, the government still fails to address some of the problems when it comes to income security. Or in the other words, they have wasted some opportunities to introduce the much needed, comprehensive, and with brutal kinds of reforms, especially in social protection. So I will list briefly with 3 major problems. One is employment-related social protection, and the second one would be like informal workers, and the third one would be COVID-19 poverty. So for the employment-related social protection, we can see government is tapping on workers' retirement fund. So the government introduced a tool scheme which allowing the workers to withdraw a maximum amount of 6,000 ringgit in 12 months, like under the what we call employment provision fund. We can see government is tapping on workers' retirement savings to support the social protection policy is quite good here, and it has implication for low wages EPF, which is the EPF contributors, and the plan actually is to support the most vulnerable population. Is poorly conceived as the bottom of 10% of the EPF contributors has only about 319 ringgit in their account. Okay, so the poor will not be able to take advantage of this, and this is very good because government is asking the workers to pay for social protection. Okay, to pay for their social protection. It's not the government who subsidize the social protection. So also we can see employment insurance schemes also fail to meet its purpose. So the primary purpose of employment insurance scheme is to provide financial assistance for the workers who have experienced job losses. The compensation works as a lifeline to guarantee they can access to minimum livelihood until the unemployed workers have successfully found a new job. However, the current data show that loss of employment report based on the number of the insurance claim, the registrant could not reflect the real unemployment that happened in our country. Take an example. We say that there is 4.6% unemployment rate in September 2020, but only 16,000. Okay, 16,000 compared to we have 700,000 of people who are unemployed, but only 16,000 of the members who submitted their application for claiming the compensation under the insurance scheme. So the application to claim the AIS was strengthened by the red tag For example, SOCSO, which is the system for social protection, members are only allowed to apply for a claim if and only if a person has contributed to the scheme for at least 12 months. So the fresh graduate or young workers who just participate in the labor force will be restricted for receiving these EIS benefits and when they were retrenched. So workers will no longer be entitled to EIS benefits if they had claimed for the compensation before, even though they have experienced termination of employment now due to the lockdown. Okay. Also, if the employees who originally retrenched due to the business shutdown, but being offered as a 3-month contract workers for the factory post-closure arrangement, they will not eligible to apply for any claim for EIS later, as the board will consider this group as the people who successfully find their jobs. So it's a very a lot of flaws in this system. So the second part is the informal workers, who are one of the most vulnerable groups during the crisis, like what the others has presented before this. So at present, the social protection measure only benefit workers with full-time employment. The government under the package only provide one cash, the economic stimulus package. They only provide like one-off cash transfer of 1,600 to the B40, okay, bottom 40 group, which include the informal workers, and also 500 for e-hailing drivers. But according to the one of the report published by our SOCSO, which they estimate the living wages for a family of 4 is about 6,000 ringgit. So compared to 6,000, we only receive one of 1,600 is completely not enough for the people to survive or to maintain the quality of living. So also, we can have like for the existing program in SOCSO, it only cover half of the employed person in our labor market. So we have 40 million of the who participate in our labor market, but only 7.5 million has registered with the system. So most of these people who are the informal workers are excluded because they don't have any access to the social protection system, such as the employment insurance schemes or the employment provident fund, which is for their retirement savings. So according to the Department of Statistics report on COVID-19 implication, 46% of self-employed respondents were retrenched during the first month on our lockdown. Almost all self-employed workers reported 94.8%. Okay, there is a reduction in their monthly income, and 35% of them experience a drop in monthly income that will exceed 90%, which means like the income. Yes, they admit that there is a drop in the income, but the fleet is up until to 90%. Okay, in terms of financial saving duration, even worse, more than 2/3 of self-employed respondents have insufficient savings. They only have sufficient savings for less than 1 month. That means they only can survive for less than 1 month. Okay, then and they will use up all their savings compared to the others like GLC or MNC companies who has sufficient savings up to 4 months. Okay, so lack of regulation to protect the welfare rights of our informal workers, like everyone else know, there is no specific regulation, law, or guideline to protect the welfare for the gig economy workers, especially like the provision under the act is not covered. So that means they are not entitled to minimum wage. There is no working hours limitation. They are not paid with annual and sick leave, as well as unfair dismissal. Okay, so the last part that I will cover is the COVID-19 poverty. I will take some examples that when we engage with the stakeholders, especially from the B40 families. So a middle-aged woman who has had to sacrifice her sleep and work as a part-time security guard at night to support her diabetes mother and herself. So there's also a UNICEF report who published by UNICEF, saying that a lot of families with the poor financial status, they only afford to eat nasi goreng, which is the fried rice with fried egg. Okay, and they only eat once, only eat the meal for once in a day. So it's very heartbreaking. So it's also matched with the one of the research institute analysis where a meal with sufficient protein has become luxury to most of the B40 families and also the others retrenched workers. So this report suggests that the bottom 20 were barely able to fulfill their basic needs such as food, housing, clothing with equalized monthly income below 1,000 ringgit. Okay, and statistic in 2019 show that 17% or 1.2 million households are in relative poverty, given that their monthly income is less than half of Malaysian household median income, okay, which is less than 2,900 ringgit. And this indicate that another 835,000 families just earn above the absolute poverty line, but are still far lower below a decent living standards. And they are particularly vulnerable for employment shocks, since it's likely that a majority of them is work preciously jobs that offer little security, especially in the times of economic crisis. And income shortfall of 700 ringgit will push all of them, okay, the 835,000 families into the absolute poverty, okay, with a shortfall of 700 ringgit. So this reality also faced by the young community, and particularly the fresh graduate, as reported by our Department of Statistics. New graduates who joined the job market last year received lower pay than those in the previous year. Most of that getting absolute lower salary by the law, which is they get lesser than 1,200 ringgit. On the other side, we can see there's a unjust shower of bonus and salary increment for bank CEOs and directors, despite the cost-cutting measure due to the fallout from the COVID-19 pandemic. For example, one of the bank's CEO recorded the highest jump in pay, taking 6.6 million in 2020 compared to 4.2 million ringgit in 2019, and 85% increase. So to put the thing in perspective, it's like a general worker who will receive a monthly pay of 1,200, which is the minimum wage, need to work for 461 years to earn such amount of money. And sorry to say that, is actually it will be an unachievable dream, because he usually consumes most of his income, since there is no there's a serious lack of savings among the B40 group. And the economic inequality can say in the Chinese proverb is like wine and meat rot behind the vermilion gates, while at the roadside we can see people freeze to death. Okay, so in conclusion, we must introduce a more comprehensive and inclusive social protection system to cover these vulnerable groups that I mentioned just now in the long run. And there are a lot, but I couldn't highlight everything today. I just highlight the major part. Okay, so first, the government should design a 5-year plan for the implementation for minimum wage to meet the what we call the poverty line income index, which is 2,208 ringgit, the correspondent to the current, like I say, PLI, to improve the quality of life. In the first 3 years of the transition period, the government should subsidize eligible SMEs with 40% of the total amount of minimum wage, because we can't push all the SME too harshly, because they contribute the most for the employment. But we also need to acknowledge that if all of the SMEs are closed down, the most vulnerable are these workers. Okay, the second is the government needs to formalize the informal workers to prevent any exploitation by the employers. Labor laws need to be enacted or revised to recognize their status as formal workers entitled to minimum wages, insurance, such as like the social employment, and also the health insurance, and contribution to the employment provident fund, which is a retirement saving. Lastly, sustainable social protection should consist of non-contributory scheme that are tax financed, and we can offer a minimum income security, especially for the poor. So the government should provide adequate cash handout to B40 groups by reforming our existing system, which is Bantuan Sara Hidup, which is a cash aid program with a more targeted assistance based on the needs. So More needs to be done to increase the depth of coverage as measured by the average expenditure per beneficiary relative to GDP per capita. In 2018, Malaysia spent like 14 billion on social assistance, which amount to 1% of GDP. This is lower than the average GDP in social assistance program across all country income groups, okay, compared to other countries. And the COVID-19 pandemic should be a wake-up call to address all these failures of social protection system for all Malaysians, using the momentum created by the crisis to build a universal social protection rather than a market-based solution for those who can afford it and porous safety nets for the poor. The beneficiary of the system would be the consumer who use and consume the goods and the service produced by the others. Hence, the money will flow back to the market and increasing the purchase demand and boosting economic growth and market dynamism. So this is our proposal for, especially in the context of post-COVID-19 pandemic. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Wong. The numbers on joblessness, unemployment, and huge drop in income across the globe are indeed depressing, and Malaysia is not spared as well. Thank you, Wong, for sharing the Malaysian situation and initiatives such as Unemployment Insurance Scheme or Employment Provident Fund, and the recommendations to improve or make the income security and the broader social protection program sufficient and effective. For our last case, our speaker is from Vietnam. Dr. Nguyen Hoang Yen, the coordinator of Network of Action for Migrant Workers, or MNET, will share with us the inclusion, or she will talk about the inclusion of informal workers and migrants in the government social assistance policy. Just a background about MNET. MNET works with 75 self-help groups of migrant workers in the formal and the informal economy. MNET also promotes participation, equality, rights, and equal access to social protection for migrant workers through evidence-based policy advocacy, capacity building for member organizations, partners and target groups, and multi-stakeholder coordination and collaboration. I now give the screen to Dr. Nguyen Hoang Yen.
Thank you, Mary. So this is my presentation. So could you see? Can you see the mic?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you. So first one, I would like to introduce a little bit about the MNET. So our full name is a Network of Action for Migrant Workers in Vietnam. And up to now, we have a 7 years operation and working already, and we got the support from Oxfam, and Light is a leader of MNET. And we focus on 4 areas. So first one is we focus on capacity building for and raising the voice of migrant workers. And the second one, we do the advocacy based on the evidence. And the third one, we do the strengthen our network. And the last one, we using social influencing to advocacy. About COVID-19, so you may know that social protection policy system in Vietnam, we just focus on the health and food only. And we do not yet to focus on labor-related problem. Example, in the decree is 36, this is the policy on regulation social protection just apply for people with disability, elderly, HIV, or people affected by a natural disaster, but not including people affected by epidemic. In our survey by March 2019, we found out that with the outbreak COVID-19, 80% informal workers lost their job and their income, so that they have no policy to support them. And the policy on emergency assistance Vietnam, we just focus for international migrant workers, no policy for internal migrant workers. That means that they do not have any support from government. And informal worker in Vietnam has no voice and not yet involved in related policy development and social security forum. And we found that the solution we need to do for the short term, we MNET thinks that we need to do the emergency relief policy for informal workers, particularly for informal migrant workers who are affected by COVID-19. And with the long term, we need to work with policy maker to so about the case, the worker to face with difficult related labor employment due to the informal migration situation need to include in the social protection system. And emergency relief policy for migrant need to cover internal migrant people. And government need to have a mechanism to collect feedback from the informal migrant worker during the development and implementation of social security policy, employment, social insurance, and social assistance, especially for emergency policy. And how did we do? I would like to give back about the situation COVID. For beginning of March 2020, we got the first case detected in Hanoi, and very fast we do the and we got the feedback from our member because MNET have a 55 group in the CIBO who has a migrant worker in Vietnam. And when the government to have to issue decision on limitation of people regarding the traveling, that means they are informal workers, they are who are street vendors, they cannot to sell their production and stop the business. And need to contact with the city ones group with nearly 2,000 members to get the survey to see how COVID can affect their living life and workforce, and and what's their need. And by the end of March, when the government to issue the social distancing lockdown for whole country, and we already have evidence in our hand, and we work with the women union and to give an open letter to all the owner and at the local and local authority to advocate them to support for informal workers to reduce or freeze the house rental fee. And we have evidence already, and we sent the open letter to Prime Minister and brief the Prime Minister and relevant ministry such as Molisa, Ministry of Finance, Investment, Ministry of Finance and MOHS to recommend a system policy for 7 groups of informal workers who are got affected by COVID-19. And after that, after that, you will see that by the end of April, government to accept 3 per 7 groups that we recommendation. So that's the first time the informal worker can include in the policy support package from government. And from the April and May, we work with Molisa to advocate them on development or implementation of support package. We call short name City 2-3 billion Vietnam. In this manual, we advocate and put a guidance on extension of beneficiary of province with successful budget. Because in the policy from government, they said that only person who have a registration card in the place they can receive this support. But you may know that the informal worker, most of them have no resident card, so they are excluded in this support. And for the manual, we put that depend by province, they can open their beneficiary. And from the June to December of 2020, we carry out the independent monitoring through the real-time assessment we call NSCORE. This is supported by Oxfam, and we have evidence in our hand says that the resident card is the right for the migrant people. They cannot access the support, emergency support by COVID-19. And we send this letter, this result to Molisa, whose ministry, that ministry to take opportunity to report for Prime Minister, about the result of support from government. And with our result in hand, we advocate Hanoi and Ho Chi Minh City, Ho Chi Minh City Women Union to support, identify for informal workers who are eligible to access support COVID package. And with our evidence and with the other workshop and policy dialogue, October 2020, government accept one more group in our recommendation that worker working in private education setting into the policy support for COVID. So that means up to now we have a 4 per 7 group recommendation accepted by government. And for the long term, with the AMRC funded, we do the rapid assessment survey on social and economy impact to COVID-19 on informal migrant workers in Hanoi and Ho Chi Minh City, because it is two biggest cities in Vietnam to have migrant people. And we collect the evidence for policy recommendation related informal worker. And in this survey, we found out that 93% of migrant workers lost their job and lost their income from the 75% up to 100%. And from the October 2020 and March 2021, and we participated in series of workshops and also technical consultation related social security and COVID-19. This event is organized even with by government agency, with UN agency and national international social security network for advocate and give a recommendation regarding necessary inclusion migrant worker into social security, both regular and emergency policy. And for all that activity, we found that the impact that we short term about the manual guidance implementation of COVID support, and we call it like a legal background for COVID to extend the beneficiary. That means, example, the cover for selling lottery in Hanoi, they cover for migrant people without temporary resident card. And we mobilize the Department of Social Assistance under the MOLISA to involve in monitoring and implementation package support by COVID-19. With the long term, MOLISA and accepts the involved MNEC license in development of emergency assistance policy. This is a chance opportunity for us to advocate the government to consider cover internal migrant worker in their policy. And MOLISA too, with the Department of Social Insurance, they accept and consult with us during the process of develop and revision of voluntary social insurance for informal workers, because in the current this policy they have a very little to benefit for informal workers, just only the retire and that only policy knows health insurance, no emergency insurance too. And the lesson learned from us, we found that all the CRO organization need to be proactive and timely to collect evidence from workers for policy recommendation. Being proactive in partnership with government, UN, Social Security Network, with our network, CRO network, and in the process development, consultation, monitoring, and enforcement of Social Security policy for migrant workers, and mobilize a whole traditional communication system, such as a workshop and conference, and social media to involve them in community-sensitive political to cause a social influence on policymakers in the development of prevalent policy for migrant workers. So this is some key findings from us. So thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Dr. Nguyen, for sharing the recommendations, both short-term and long-term solutions, and the various steps that you've taken so far, which include working with the government ministry, as well as with local and international NGOs, in order to address the unemployment or income difficulties being experienced by informal workers as well as migrant workers in Vietnam. So that ends the presentations for this session. Now we go to question and answer. Yeah, we have 15 minutes for question and answer. There are 2 questions posted on the chat box. I will read the questions. The first question is addressed to Ellie or Ellie Rosita. This is from Rocky Green. He commented that the presentation was good to implement, was good. And to implement, what are the struggles that you have gone through and how did you overcome them?
Yeah, thank you. I will speak in Indonesia. Yeah, sebenarnya ini tidak mudah ya, karena memang harus ada yang mengcovernya semacam undang-undang. Lalu saat ini kami masih mengedepankan dialog, karena kalau kami ingin mempengaruhi kebijakan, kami harus ada masuk dalam sistem itu. Gitu. Dan tantangan yang lain adalah ketika ini hanya dilakukan oleh satu serikat buruh, sementara serikat buruh lain itu tidak mau berjuang bersama-sama kita, ini juga menjadi sebuah hal yang tidak bagus, karena stakeholder, misalnya pemerintah atau pengusaha akan melihat yang memperjuangkan kok hanya sedikit. Berarti ini tidak untuk kepentingan orang banyak, karena hanya satu konfederasi yang memperjuangkan. Tapi terlepas dari itu, seperti yang saya katakan tadi, bahwa saya memberanikan diri bersama tim menemui Menteri Perekonomian dan meminta kenapa tidak melibatkan serikat buruh untuk sosialisasi tentang kartu prakerja dan jaminan kehilangan pekerjaan. Nah, terjawab sudah bahwa mereka mengatakan, oh kami sangat senang hati dan mari kita melakukan sesuatu. Lalu kami mengatakan kami tidak mau hanya lisan, tapi kami harus dibuat dalam dokumen. Mari kita membuat sebuah agreement bahwa kami akan terlibat memastikan itu diakses oleh orang-orang yang membutuhkan, karena tanpa kehadiran serikat buruh kita tidak akan mengetahui sebenarnya berapa persen buruh yang bisa menjangkau atau berapa persen masyarakat yang bisa menjangkau program ini. Jadi kami tidak mau laporan itu timpang hanya diberikan oleh bagian dari pemerintah atau pengusaha saja, sementara laporan sebenarnya by data adalah dari serikat buruh, karena serikat buruh selalu hadir untuk ikut mensosialisasikan dan juga bertanya seperti apa. Nah, jaminan kehilangan pekerjaan sebenarnya itu Apanya keberatannya kami adalah karena ditujukan hanya kepada buruh yang menjadi anggota jaminan sosial BPJS. Lalu ini pun yang sudah menjadi anggota itu 24 bulan dan paling tidak 6 bulan dia mencicil. Lalu yang mendapatkan itu adalah yang buruh bergaji 5 juta ke bawah. Nah, pertanyaannya adalah bagaimana buruh-buruh yang memang tidak bisa dijangkau atau mereka memang mengiur ke BPJS tapi itu tidak didaftarkan oleh manajemennya. Jadi ini perjuangan kami yang sangat panjang, di samping kami masih berkampanye untuk jaminan kehilangan pekerjaan itu mencakup juga buruh-buruh informal yang memang menyumbang sangat banyak untuk perekonomian negara Indonesia. Mungkin jawabannya seperti itu, tapi walaupun tidak sangat pas.
Okay, thank you, Rosita, for the response. Now, for Wong, there are two questions. One is from Yatini Solistiwati. Wong, can you explain whether the social protection scheme during the COVID-19 pandemic, migrant workers can access the stimulus provided by the Malaysian government, especially those who work in the formal sector? And I think the question by Sheikh Salahuddin is also addressed to you. How about for gig and platform workers? Are there also income support schemes for them?
Okay. So frankly, I just answered for Yatine at the chat room. So basically, frankly to say, Malaysian government doesn't provide any assistance for the migrant workers, even though they are part of the formal employment system. Okay, there are a few reasons. One is because they are not registered with social security organization, which I mentioned just now, the SOCSO. So that's why they are not eligible for, like, let's say, the insurance system and the others. Okay, the second thing is because I would say Malaysian government is discriminating the migrant workers. Even they use it as a political tool to demonize them, to gain the populist votes from the others, especially from the voters. So that's why they demonize them, they mistreat them in order to gain popularity. That's why we call them populist government. Even though Malaysian government, let's say, they are part of the formal employment system, so logically they should be eligible for wage subsidy scheme. Okay, because the wage subsidy scheme is to help the SMEs so that they can help the workers as well. But these migrant workers are excluded, even though they are documented, even though they are in the formal sector. So that's why I say Malaysian government is demonized. They are witch hunting the migrant workers during the pandemic, and especially for those undocumented workers. And I also sent out the link. If you notice about what Al Jazeera has published about the documentary about the migrant workers. So I also send the YouTube link inside. I think I also encourage everyone to see this. I think because we need to have like the public shaming for our racist government, so that they really take into account like international voices about this, you know, not discriminating the migrant workers. Okay, so if about the gig economy worker, because it's quite new in Malaysia. Like let's say we have the Grab, okay, Uber has been replaced by Grab, okay, and also the Foodpanda, all those riders, and that's why I'm highlighted just now. They are part of the informal sector. They are part of the informal sector, and they are also excluded with the most of the what we call the assistance in the stimulus package. Even though there is assistance, like let's say we take example, let's say lorry drivers or all this, they're also giving one-off only. E-hailing drivers, they're giving one-off 500 ringgit. But we know that that is completely insufficient for people to maintain the quality of life. Because like I said just now, a family of 4, they need 6,000 to support their families. Like a single person with my age, and they need 2,000 and 600 in order to have a decent life. So it's completely not enough. So that's why currently our organization we are doing is we are pushing for the social protection for informal workers. We are asking the government to formalize this, to acknowledge that we have this problem, and also we need to formalize them and put them in the formal employment system, so that once, if we don't know whether there is going to be another pandemic, but if they do, at least we know how to identify them and assist them. Yeah, thank you.
Wong, there's a follow-up, a clarification. Are gig and platform worker organizations included in National Social Security Board for unorganized workers for gig and platform workers? This is from Sheikh Salahuddin. Yes or no?
I'm trying to find his question because
yeah.
Including gig economy workers into.
Yeah.
So far, due to a lot of restriction in our labor laws, so basically, I think we don't have any platform workers or gig economy workers organization. So I think yeah, it's true. So there's a lot of things to do. We need to reform the law so that they can build up their own organization and to have a collective bargaining power, okay, to fight for their rights and their welfare. So yeah, back to the question is yes, we want to include them into the security, the social security system. We want to do that. So the part of our initiative is to formalize the informal workers, and we are pushing for more reforms in terms of social policy as well as the labor law reforms. So to include this person, either is revised or reformed or we want to enact the new laws. Does that answer your questions, Sheikh Salahuddin?
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. There are no more questions for this session, but I went through the questions posted and I saw one question for the session earlier, which I think it would be good also to hear from our speakers what are their views regarding this. So the question earlier was raised by Sandeep. Social protection in most cases is insufficient, and the nature of work now is informal and there is nothing for anyone. Okay, the question for the panelists, which I think this could also apply to the panelists for this second session, is how to organize a momentum. Since there seems to be no organized momentum, is this right? Yeah, how to organize a momentum for social protection, since there seems to be no organized momentum in this regard, or so far the actions have been fragmented. And what are the strategies that you think could apply for this? Is this right, Sandeep? Maybe one or two sentences from our panelists for the second session. We can start from Rosita.
Ya, mungkin di sini perlunya kolaborasi. Jadi bagaimana untuk mencapai ini menjadi sebuah peraturan atau sebuah perundang-undangan yang mengcover buruh di informal itu memang tidak boleh hanya serikat buruh saja atau misalnya yang tidak melibatkan pemerintah, karena regulasinya kan harus ada diatur di sana. Jadi banyak sekalipun kita lakukan mengorganisir statement atau bikin kampanye-kampanye, kalau itu tidak diikat dalam sebuah peraturan, memang untuk mencapai itu sangat sulit. Saya kira memang sejauh ini sudah banyak sekali yang dilakukan oleh pihak-pihak serikat buruh seperti kita, ada seminar-seminar, ada kampanye, ada tuntutan-tuntutan, tapi karena itu tidak ada pengaturan baik di tingkat global atau misalnya di tingkat nasional, dan juga keinginan masing-masing pihak ini untuk duduk bersama-sama, dan itu sangat sulit saya kira. Jadi intinya adalah partnership, kolaborasi, dan dialog sosial.
Okay, thank you, Rosita. So the question again is how to organize a momentum for social protection, especially for informal workers, and what are the strategies for this? So Wong?
There is no translation
sentences.
in English, Maris.
No translation, sorry.
Ellie
Okay,
can.
who can translate?
The momentum. I don't know how to say, but I think, as I mentioned before, that this is not only fight for by the worker itself, but how we can engage with other party, like make a collaboration and also partnership, and also how in the global, and also how the government will comply and also take the chance to change their mind to protect them, because as Indonesia right now, the situation in Indonesia, we have more than 55% from the total of workers informal, so they need also protection by government. But until now, even though in our new regulation still excluded of them, but I think it always national and global level always campaign about that. But I didn't see it, because in G20 also they less to talking about informal workers. So it is like partial campaign, only little people, small people to talking about this. Even country always forget about their right. So I think if we make like wider discussion, invite also them as speaker. Invite also, yes, invite also the employer, the parliament, and also the civil society. Yeah, if only workers to do like this, I'm not sure it's not success. But we can open welcome with the people outside and campaign, what's that? Campaign again.
Okay. Thank you, Rosita. Before I go to Wong and Dr. Nguyen, there's one question from Rosalinda Ofeneo addressed to Rosita. Are trade unions organizing informal workers and or working with informal workers associations to secure social security and protection for all workers?
Saya kira pertama, apa yang kita janjikan terhadap buruh informal ini, perlindungan apa, lalu keinginan mereka juga mungkin bersama-sama dengan kita untuk bagaimana mendapatkan perlindungan itu by regulation, by undang-undang. Itu kan tidak mudah. Tapi memang yang kita lihat sekarang adalah keinginan, memang di Indonesia ada pengaturan misalnya buruh yang iurannya dibantu oleh pemerintah. Makanya itu agak berat mereka memang dilindungi oleh asuransi perlindungan ini. Tapi saya kira di SBSI terutama di konstruksi, Federasi Konstruksi Informal yang dimana Mas Bismo ada, mereka sudah lama sekali mengorganisir buruh informal dan itu mereka juga di-cover oleh BPJS perlindungannya. Nah, sekarang ini karena COVID kan kita memang jadi banyak buruh dari formal ke informal. Mereka sekarang jadi pengusaha-pengusaha kecil. Bagaimana melanjutkan ini? Saya kira ini adalah kampanye serikat buruh dan juga kami akan melakukannya terus-menerus supaya mereka suatu saat akan terlindungi karena mereka juga menyumbang untuk perekonomian negara gitu. Jadi tidak mudah. Saya kira ini pekerjaan yang tidak mudah, tapi seperti yang saya katakan tadi adalah ketika serikat buruh hanya fokus untuk merekrut atau mengorganisir buruh formal, disitulah tertinggalnya buruh informal. Karena saya lihat rata-rata serikat buruh di Indonesia selalu memikirkan buruh informal, bahkan soal platform digital online gig itu mereka lupakan. Jadi saya kira ini memang tugas utama bagi buruh, bagaimana buruh informal ini juga kita organisir, kita bikin pengertian, lalu apa yang kita bisa janjikan tentang perlindungan dari negara bagi mereka.
Rosita, I'm not sure if there was a translation, but there were comments that there was not. There is, okay, yeah. So, good. Okay, so now we go to the short responses. Wong and Dr. Nguyen. Maybe 2 sentences from each speaker, just to give their short view on gaining momentum for the campaign on social protection and what are the strategies. So 2 sentences perhaps from each. Wong, let's start with Wong, and then Dr. Nguyen, and then we go to conclusion.
For us, actually, what we're trying to do is because we are research and also advocacy organization. So first of all, what the stage is, we will do the research, we will do all the readouts, and to identify all those the problems that have in our country, deal with the social protection system, and we try to have a very brief policy paper writing on that. So this is for our bargaining chips, saying that look at this. Or to tell all the policymakers that let's solve this problem. So sometimes policymakers might be very lazy, so it might be very effective if they do so. And the second part, it will come with the capacity building workshop. So we are also organizing the workshop with others, trade unions, all those related NGOs, so that to give a very overview to understand the informal sector's problem. And up until then, we will mobilize all these people, and also we will try to empower the informal workers by let them know what are their rights. So especially like giving out leaflets, all this. And the end is when we have the roundtable discussion with the policymakers, and we hopefully it can be done. This is our initial plan, and we are start executing it. So we hope everyone can listen, can hear the good news from us. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Wong. Now we go to Dr. Nguyen, also to close the session.
Yeah. I think with the same with Mr. Ke and John Ke, when we have an epidemic, we collect right away to evidence to show that how affected by COVID-19 for the informal worker. Because in our government, we do not have a system to follow this person, no number, no data from them. And with the evidence in our hands, we work very close with the policymaker, and we work very close with the socialist, social influencing. So I mean, we work with VTV, we call VTV that TV, national TV, and we make the showcase, and we in that channel, million people can to hear to see how difficult informal worker when COVID-19 come in. And with all of this one, and of course the same with Indonesia, we attend on the workshop. We bring the informal workers come to there to tell about their story, tell about their problem and difficulty. And we go until their living place, and all of that we record it and bring it to the military. So we work with them. And my government to agree that our system, social policy system, exclude in their policy, and they agree that we continue working with us to develop for long-term support for this group. Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Nguyen. Now I give the screen to Kun, the Tavernier from INSP. He will give the concluding remarks or key takeaways from today's webinar on income security in the age of uncertainties.
Thank you, Maris. I hope you all understand me. You hear me? I'll just give a very brief and an overview of the most important things that I wrote down. From the presentation of Brother Nuno from the ILO, He explained that has been increasing informality because of lack of financial buffers in the formal sector, but also, of course, again and again, that informal workers and informal economic actors are more exposed and were even forced in many cases to sell their productive assets. And in the responses of the governments, the most important lesson is probably that there is a big missing middle in most countries, especially in Asia, people who are not registered as poor and not included in the formal social security contributory social security systems, who didn't get sufficient or who didn't get any support. And then a final takeaway, I think, that social protection is likely to become even more relevant in the emerging phase of the crisis and the recovery. So the risk of austerity is looming, let's say, around the corner, and this really has to be avoided if we don't want to fall back in a very difficult and even a prolonged, very difficult situation for many workers. As a way out, Nuno pointed to the need to more integrate better the contributory and non-contributory mechanisms of social protection, and to be very flexible, to think out of the box, to just make sure that everybody, especially in this missing middle and in the informal economy, can be covered. From Nepal, there has been a substantial investment, substantial amount in this government Prime Minister Employment Guarantee Program. But of course, as such, this is not sufficient. More social investment is needed. There is a need for a government social welfare program as an addition. There is a need for more support for micro savings and more microfinancing programs for the micro enterprises, and also a need for a policy that could lead or steer a bit the remittances from migrant workers more to productive and income generating initiatives, and not only to more charity-based initiatives. From the Philippines, from HomeNet, the same effects, very dire effects for people in the informal economy, for the poor populations were presented. But indeed, some hopeful initiatives taken from the grassroots to develop new initiatives, to use new technologies. For example, in the production of personal protective equipment, finding new markets for products, new initiatives for farming, even urban farming, to guarantee some basic food security, some basic income security for people. And the main lesson to learn is to continue these initiatives and to strengthen and expand the organization and the organizing of people concerned. From Belgium, one of the lessons is that self-employment is not always freely chosen. It's also sometimes imposed on workers, and so it's sometimes used to bypass labor protection and social security. Even in a high-income country like Belgium, platform workers and informal workers were like felt double penalty. Actually, there was less work. They lost their jobs as such because restaurants, cafes were closed. As a response, many people had to resort to these platforms to try to gain some form of income. There was a huge influx of new workers in the platform economy. But again, then the amount of work in these platforms didn't increase, maybe even on the contrary. So that the amount of work had to be shared with more workers, leading to reduced incomes. And one final thing to maybe take away, so it is a big challenge to include this big group, growing group of informal or semi-informal workers in the platform economy, even in a high-income country, to include them in the social protection system. And also an important phrase I remember is that uncertainty is sometimes also a construction. For example, the Belgian government voted laws to actually institutionalize non-standard work, which is something that trade unions and workers' movements don't need to accept. This is not the way forward to solve the challenges ahead. From Indonesia, impressive gains for social protection systems, statutory social protection systems, a new unemployment insurance that would cover 7 million unemployed and 8 million underemployed workers. But of course, many challenges ahead in a labor market which totals more than 130 million workers. So the way forward that was pointed out was to make sure that social dialogue is really taking place everywhere at the provincial level, to make sure that employers comply with their duties, with their obligations is very important. The challenge, again, like in most of the countries, most of the cases that were presented, the exclusion of informal workers, it's a big challenge. There are mechanisms that seem to work, subsidized mechanisms, for example, in the construction sector, but it's not an easy task. It's possible, but a lot of work ahead to achieve this broader coverage, to include the informal workers and to include the lobby and the advocacy for that. And also one of the lessons learned, it's a long-term job. The advocacy started in 2008 and it's only materialized in 2019 with a new policy. From Malaysia, one of the big lessons is that in the formal social security system, only half the workers are actually effectively covered. And even in the responses, there was a one-off cash transfer. It was insufficient, grossly insufficient, way below the poverty line. And there is a list of, and we will make a report, of course, of recommendations formalizing informal employment, including informal workers in health insurance and provident fund. But one of the key things I remember is the very low spending by the Malaysian government, even compared to countries with a similar GDP. So there too, more is possible, I would say. And from my experience, this is also true in many countries in Asia. It was also pointed by Nuno from the ILO that in Asia Pacific, especially the spending by governments for social protection is very, very low, even compared to comparable countries, for example, in Latin America. From Vietnam, important lessons learned, the need to be proactive, the need to engage with other actors in society to make alliances, the need to collect evidence, also to collect evidence, real-time evidence, to show to the policymakers the barriers that people have to pass to access certain policies. And then also the result, not all vulnerable groups were covered in the end, but first 3 of them and then 4 were covered. So successes, also success in consultation, promises to involve MNET, to involve the network in the evaluation of the policies, in the renewal of future social protection mechanisms, social protection policies. So there too, so proactive, collect evidence, make partnerships, use all kinds of communication systems that you can find, engage with scientists, and then it does lead to impact and to changes. So I think this is a very good mix and a good combination of experiences and initiatives taken both by governments after lobby and pressure from civil society, or initiatives taken by civil society organizations, which will really feed into the future work at the Asia-Europe People's Forum in May, where we will also go into this issue deeper. So I would thank all people who presented, all the participants for their interesting questions a lot. I think there is many things we can take away for the future campaigns for stronger social protection for all. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kun. I think with this, we can close the webinar. Thanks to all the speakers. Special thanks to Sister Tuha, Maris, our college Kun and Bruno, also Kathy, and the 2 interpreters. Thanks for staying with us. So last request is, if it is possible, please turn on your video just to say goodbye, and so all the participants can see your face. Yes. Guyet? Okay, so thank you very much for all of you. Have a good, nice weekend.
Good afternoon.
Thank you, thank you.
Bye, thank you.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Ian. Thank you.